Bobby forecasted that the digital currency would reach 10,000, yes, eventually 16,000. And all of us, I remember this because I was one of them, raised our eyebrows because we just thought that was so far-fetched. And look where we are now. Those values have been surpassed in a matter of months, right to its peak of 20,000 last month, although with so much volatility, I think it's shaved off that value to about 30% in just a matter of weeks. And yet, despite such volatility, its surge in the last 12 months has been staggering, worrying too, and yet unprecedented, because I don't think any of us has seen this kind of performance in any other financial instrument. Bobby also predicted some friendly type of regulation by the Chinese government on cryptocurrency. Instead, in September last year, the government did a hard turn in China and shuttered the top virtual currency exchanges. Those moves didn't make much of a dent at the cryptocurrency surge of late anyway, which says a lot. Our speaker was at the center of the storm, so he's going to shed light on what's going on and more. Everyone, let's give a warm welcome to Bobby Lee.
Hello, good afternoon to everyone. I'm very pleased to be here at the FCC today on, I guess is it the first working day in Hong Kong? You guys worked yesterday? Okay, good, second working day. So pleasure to be here. So please continue with the lunch. I told the organizers I'm gonna skip lunch so that I could talk more about Bitcoin. This is more of my passion. So I'm supposed to start at 1:20, but I'll start early to just give a primer about what Bitcoin is, what is this so-called digital cryptocurrency, and then I'll go into my talk at around 1:20. Let me check on the time. So as I get started, how many of you actually own Bitcoin? Wow, a few. I hope you bought it not right around the so-called high mark of 20,000 US dollars. And the other thing people should know is that when I say what price you bought it at, I don't actually mean that you had to buy one Bitcoin at that price. So if Bitcoin is at $15,000 today, you don't have to spend 15,000 US dollars to buy a Bitcoin. You can actually buy a fractional amount, whether it's a tenth of a Bitcoin or a hundredth of a Bitcoin and so on and so forth. Okay, and then for people who got in early, actually you may have purchased multiple Bitcoins because back then it was quite cheap. So let's give a primer about Bitcoin. So how many people truly learned about Bitcoin and heard about Bitcoin last year, meaning 2017? The first year heard about Bitcoin. Okay, about 10, 15 people. How many heard about it in 2016? Okay, similar amounts. How about 2015? Okay, a few. How about 2014? Getting early. Wow, many more. How about 2013? That's when Bitcoin became really crazy in China. 2012? Any 2012? I'm going to keep my eyes open. Yes, 2012. Wow. 2011? Yes, wow, one gentleman there. Are you smiling or not smiling? He's not smiling because he didn't buy any in 2011, like me. So I heard about Bitcoin in 2011. I didn't get to buy any until much later. How about 2010? Crickets, silence in the room. 2009? So the real Satoshi Nakamoto, the inventor of Bitcoin, created Bitcoin in a white paper that he published in November of 2008. So that was more than 9 years ago. No, is that right? Yeah. And subsequently, he released a software in January of 2009. So precisely 9 years ago. In fact, it was yesterday that the first so-called Bitcoin was created in the digital ecosystem. So what is Bitcoin? Bitcoin is it's a digital cryptocurrency. So the word digital, you guys all understand. Oh, by the way, I purposely don't use the word virtual currencies. Many people heard about virtual currencies. And the reason is that virtual currencies are a category of electronic currencies that was invented and popularized in the 1990s. Whether it's in-game currencies like World of Warcraft, if you play Sims, if you play these games, that have tokens in them, gold coins, those are what we call virtual currencies. They're issued by companies. But in our industry, we properly refer Bitcoin and its related things as digital currencies to purposely differentiate from virtual currencies. And I'll explain that why in a little bit. So digital, you understand. Digital just means something that's digital, ones and zeros, internet, and so on. Now, what does the word crypto mean? Does anyone not know what crypto means? Crypto, CRYPTO. Okay, a few people? Okay, good. Crypto is short for cryptography. And cryptography is a branch of mathematics. Mathematics, you all know. We all studied mathematics in grade school, but probably very few people studied cryptography in college or university. So cryptography is a university-level sort of subject. It's a branch of mathematics generally dealing with in computer science that deal with encoding secret information and decoding of secret information. This is the stuff that computers were invented for. If you recall, computers were invented in the 1940s, 1950s during the World War II. In England, in United States, the ENIAC, I don't even know the names of those computers, that was used to encode secret messages between the Allied forces and then, of course, the Nazi Germany. They also used it as code, as cipher code. So computers, ironically, were invented for that task, in the 1950s, for encoding information secretly and decoding it. So that's the branch called cryptography. And cryptography has been with us all along over the last 70, 80 years of the invention of the computers. It's just that we don't talk about it in normal day-to-day life. But if any of you, probably every one of you now, has a mobile phone, and your mobile phone, by nature, by definition, already has cryptography built in. Because all the interaction, all the websites you go to, all the email accounts, all the SMS, iMessage, FaceTime, all of that uses encryption technology, and that's cryptography. So that's the root of what we call crypto digital currency or digital cryptocurrency. So in the old days of virtual currencies, those were units of money, electronic money, that were assigned by companies like World of Warcraft, gaming companies. Also very similar to, I'm going to guess this, that all of you belong to airline mile reward clubs. Is that right? Even hotel reward points, hotel reward clubs. So all of these reward points, those are all virtual currencies. So virtual currencies actually don't use much of cryptography, whereas Bitcoin does. So Bitcoin actually is based in mathematics of cryptography. The idea is that Bitcoin introduces 3 new concepts to the world that's different than anything before it, meaning that before 2009, the inventor, his name is Satoshi Nakamoto. Sounds like a Japanese name. We really don't know who he is because he has never come out to identify himself. It's always been a pseudonym. Some journalists know this. Do journalists report anonymously? Probably not, right? Yes? No? You wouldn't raise your hand if you did. So same thing. That's why I was asking anyone from 2009, because if Satoshi Nakamoto is sitting with us, he probably would not raise his hand either, or her hand. So for that matter, Bitcoin introduced 3 fundamentally new concepts to our world, to our society, that prior to 2009 was never possible. Okay, think about the significance of that. Computers have been invented since the 1950s. The internet was invented, in the 1970s and 80s, and then the World Wide Web was invented in the 1990s, and we have e-commerce, right? And we've had, 20 years of great e-commerce, internet, mobile apps in the last 10 years. And Bitcoin was invented actually 9 years ago. And the key 3 things are this, okay? For the first time, we have a digital currency online that has a limit. Meaning the number of digital currencies issued is actually 21 million. So Bitcoin forever will have an upper limitation of 21 million Bitcoins. Okay, now that's the total number of Bitcoins. What any one individual, one account holder can have can range from 21 million in theory, down to 1 Bitcoin, down to sub-portions of Bitcoin. So Bitcoin itself is subdivisible down to 8 decimal places. So the Hong Kong dollar, for example, is divisible down to 100. Actually, we don't use it anymore, right? Hong Kong dollars, 0.1, 0.01, 0.1. I remember 20 years ago in Hong Kong, we used to have 0.1 Hong Kong dollars. No? You don't remember? Anyone? Old school Hong Kong? Anyways, so Different currencies have different decimal places. China, the U.S. dollar has 2 decimal places. Canadian dollar, Japanese yen does not. Korean won does not. So Bitcoin actually has 8 decimal places for the smallest unit, and then the smallest unit we also call it a special name called the Satoshi, in honor of the inventor Satoshi Nakamoto. So one Bitcoin can be divisible down to all the 8 decimal places. It means it has 100 million Satoshis. And then the world has 21 million Bitcoins, which if you do the math, it's a lot of little units flying around. So, but the point is, it's not that it's a lot, but rather it's very little. It's very few. And the reason is Bitcoin protocol dictates that there are only forever 21 million. And how does it guarantee that? Now we're going to talk about the second point. The second point that Bitcoin gave the world is that for the first time, we have a system of currency of unit that is not organized or controlled by any single entity, individual, or government. Let's review what I said there. All the virtual currencies I spoke of earlier, the game points, the United Airlines miles, the Cathay Pacific reward miles, the Visa credit card points with your HSBC Bank or Standard Chartered Bank, the hotel reward points with Marriott and Hilton. Those are all virtual points, virtual currencies that are assigned and managed by the respective companies. Is that right? Do any of you, I assume all of you participate in these programs, right? Any of you morally object to participating in these virtual reward programs? Anyone? Okay. But the point is, you participate in it, but in the end, the company, the hotel, the airline, the game maker, Tencent, or whoever makes a video game, they control and manage all the accounts. So in theory, they can come in and so-called freeze the account. They can come in and stop you from transferring the points to someone else. They can come in and reset the value of the points. They can even come in and not just confiscate, but flood the market with more points by injecting into an account. Does that make sense? So that's the nature of virtual currencies, that it's always at the mercy of the issuer. Okay? So Bitcoin is trying to solve that problem, and it did successfully. So when Satoshi Nakamoto invented Bitcoin 9 years ago, his sole purpose was to create a new currency for the world that solves the problem of centralization, meaning that it's no longer centralized, meaning that he himself, as the creator of Bitcoin, no longer has the magic key to change the features and functionality within Bitcoin. So when I said 21 million Bitcoin, even Satoshi Nakamoto himself cannot reassign more Bitcoins to himself. He cannot arbitrarily stop people from using Bitcoins. He cannot start people from using Bitcoins. He cannot do much of anything. He cannot even recall the Bitcoins nor cancel Bitcoins. He can't even issue more Bitcoins. Okay, so those two things go hand in hand, meaning the limited issuance and the decentralization. Okay, and the third aspect is a little bit more tricky. The third aspect of Bitcoin is its identity. I don't mean the identity of Bitcoin or Satoshi Nakamoto. What I mean is the identity process of how ownership is held. So think of it this way. I'm going to segue a little bit. We still have some time. All of us here are dressed nicely. We're here at lunch because we're well-to-do members of society. And you think about all the assets, no matter how rich or how poor you are today, the vast majority of what you own, and I'll just go out blindly and say this, is actually under your name. The things you own are held under your identity, under your name. Think about the money you have in your bank. It's really just under your name, on your bank account. If you own any real estate in Hong Kong, if you do, luckily, it's held under your name. So all bank accounts, all stock brokerage accounts, all the stocks you own is held under your name. All the real estate, all the money in banks is held in your name. The only things that you own that are outside of the so-called identity ownership model are the ties you wear, the watches and jewelry you have on yourself, the clothes, the sunglasses, the mobile phone you carry, and maybe a few bottles of red wine that you might have in your home or in your attic or cellar. Okay, artwork is held physically. So the world, if you look at history, centuries ago, ownership is always by physical means. Meaning if I hold on to it, whether it's a hammer or an axe, or whether it's a wheelbarrow, or whether it's a few eggs from a chicken, whatever I hold, that's mine. And I could choose to give it to you by handing it over to you. And if I want it back, I have to come and chase after you. Okay? That's the old model. But with the advent of society, of government, in the last 50 years, 100 years, ownership changed from physical ownership to what we call identity-based ownership. And this is the core of Bitcoin. The reason I'm taking this segue to talk about ownership model is because this is the essence of Bitcoin, what it's new. So do you guys agree with me that today, vast majority of what you own, what individually we own, is held under our name? Do we agree? Can I get a raise of hands? Yeah? Okay. Are there any exceptions? Yes, like I said, the red wine, even cars are held under your name. You know what I'm saying? So, like, for example, I had a car stolen in the U.S. about 15 years ago. And they stole my car. You know, I had the key, but that was pointless because the key without the car is useless. But at the same time, when the police found the car, they returned it back to me because I'm the registered owner of the vehicle. Okay, so whether it's real estate, cars, whether it's large things, airplanes. So the only things that are not under your name are artwork, red wine, and electronics, small things. So all big ticket items are always under your name. So we don't, what I just told you there, vast majority of you did not realize it. Is that right? You don't make the differentiation. You think, oh yeah, it's all good, it's all good. But the difference is that when something is owned under your identity, and here's a killer, get ready for this punchline. When something is owned under your name, you're not the real owner because you don't have custody of it. Because in the end, if it's held under your name, you're only given permission to it by a higher force, meaning there's always a third party involved in judging you for who you are. Think about that. If it's held under your name, that means you do not have true authority over it. Someone else always have the authority to override what you want to do with it. When I own real estate in China, I don't have the legal authority to sell it to whoever I want for whatever price I want. I have to play within the rules set by the government. When I have money in HSBC bank account, I don't have the authority to do whatever I want with it. I have to play by the rules, whether it's a 9 to 5 hours, whether it's how much cash I can withdraw, whether it's proving my own identity to the bank that this is me, this is my money, I want it back, or I want to move my money to Bill Gates or to Osama bin Laden. HSBC will make a judgment whether they allow me to do that or not. Now, of course, Osama bin Laden's dead and Bill Gates doesn't need my money. But the point is, if I had $1 million in HSBC, I don't have the right to move it to whoever I want to. And that's the killer. That identity-based ownership is not real ownership. Okay, whether it's real estate, whether it's cars. That's why rich people, the first thing they do when they get rich, they want to find a way to invest it and diversify. Multiple bank accounts, multiple countries, multiple jurisdictions, real estate in different countries, different asset classes, and so on and so forth. Because they don't want to get caught by the grips of one government or one country. Make sense? Good thing we don't have this problem of being rich. Only a few people smiling. Okay, so back to Bitcoin. So why did I take that detour? Is because Bitcoin ownership, you guessed it, is not by name and not by identity. Bitcoin ownership is also not by physical means either, because there is nothing physical to it. So this is the third killer feature about Bitcoin. Bitcoin ownership is defined by the knowledge of the private password or the private key of a specific Bitcoin account. So every Bitcoin that you hear about people owning, they're always in one account or another account. The account has a long account number, just like a bank account number, but much longer. And each bank account is actually tied to an identity, right? Every bank account is tied to a real person's name. In Bitcoin, every Bitcoin account is tied to a private key. And this is where the cryptography comes in. So every Bitcoin account has its unique private key password that cannot be changed. I want to emphasize that. It's a small detail, but emphasize it cannot be changed. So meaning Bitcoin accounts, regardless of whether the accounts have a balance or not, whether it's zero balance Bitcoin account or a high balance Bitcoin account, it always has a private key. And the owner of the Bitcoin is considered the owner only if they have access and know the private key. Does that make sense? So for the first time in human history, we now have ownership by information. Meaning if I know the password, the long password to that Bitcoin account that has 1 Bitcoin or 10 Bitcoins, that means I am rich. I have 15,000 or 150,000 US dollars, of which I can transfer to any of you, whether you're Bill Gates or Osama bin Laden, with no one else that can deny me that ability. That is the key of Bitcoin. Okay, let me repeat that. By knowing the private key of the Bitcoin, you now have irrevocable access to the Bitcoin. Irrevocable is a real important word here. I know lawyers use it. Any lawyers here? Yeah, right. Irrevocable, you guys like that? Irrevocable trust, irrevocable, contract to do this and this and that. So when it's irrevocable, it really means that, because by knowing the private key, you know how to do the encryption for that account. Now, the only time where you can't do it anymore is if you forget it. Okay, if you forget it or you lose the private key, then you can't do it anymore. But as long as you have the key, you can move the Bitcoins in the account to any other account, and no one can stop you. I don't care if it's Osama bin Laden. I don't care if it's Donald Trump. I don't care if it's Hillary Clinton, or in Hong Kong, who's our Carrie Lam, whoever else, So that's the point about Bitcoin. And you know what? Because of that aspect, a lot of haters. What I just said there has generated a lot of haters. The existing financial monetary system hates that. They hate it to no end. They hate it because their sole existence was their previous ability to do these things for you. Prior to Bitcoin, the banking system and the financial monetary system had a monopoly on the ownership and the control of your money, of our money. Our money, we gladly deposit into our banks, HSBC and Standard Chartered Bank, and then they question whether I am who I am. I have to bring 2 forms of ID to go get my own money out, and I can only withdraw 20,000 on a certain day, and I can only transfer 50,000. And I can't even transfer abroad without telling them why. So anyway, so this is my rant about Bitcoin. So now you understand a little bit why there's this huge struggle, this huge fight between the governments and the advocators of Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies. Okay, so that's a very sort of heavy intro, but I talked about some of the key points. To summarize, 3 key points. Number 1 is its fixed amount, 21 million. The governments hate that also because they love printing more money, and with Bitcoin they can't print more Bitcoin, so they can't do that. Number 2 is decentralized, so there's no censorship and no control of the funds but going back and forth. Number 3, the ownership is by information, meaning as long as you know the information, you own the Bitcoin. Whether you're crossing a border, whether you're doing commerce, you know it, and that's power, and power is money. Okay, so that's my intro. So please continue eating. I'm going to go now into the meat of the talk. Is that okay? Okay. So the past, present, and future of Bitcoin in China. So it is. Sorry, this animations are a little bit slow. So is the Bitcoin story in China finally over? As you know, China shut down Bitcoin exchanges in end of September, October, and many people thought the Bitcoin story in China is over. So this is the meat of my talk. So it turned out China is actually crazy about Bitcoins. Let's see if we do this properly. Oh, nice animation. Yeah, I spent 2 hours on this. No. So I had to do it again. No. Okay, China is really crazy about Bitcoin. And really, it's not so much about crazy about Bitcoin. China is actually just crazy about anything that can make money. Anything that's investment, speculation, and all that stuff. It's in the blood. It's in the Chinese blood. So a brief history of Bitcoin. I'm going to tell you the history of Bitcoin in China through prices in BTC. And of course, since I myself am based in Shanghai, we used to run an exchange called BTC China. It's a renminbi exchange. So the pricing is based on renminbi, CNY currency. So it's similar to Hong Kong dollars, especially over the last 8 years. 6 years. So it's a proxy for Hong Kong dollars. In the very early days, and this is where it began, okay? So BTC China started in 2011, June. That's when my company started, my two co-founders started the website. It was the first Bitcoin exchange in China that started basically in June of 2011. And it started trading at 100 renminbi. The first trade, buy, sell 100 RMB, okay? So of course, over the next few months, you may not, I don't have a laser pointer, but by a few months in, it dipped down to about 20 RMB. Wow, is that a big fall? Yeah, it fell 80% after 4 months. Crazy. How volatile is that? Imagine buying something and then falling 80%. Would you have the tenacity to hold on to it? Maybe you sold it. That's why it went down to 20 RMB. It went below 20. It went to 14 RMB, actually, on December of 2011. That was 6 years ago. Okay, so it climbed back up and then briefly touched 100 RMB again by by summertime of 2012, a year later. Okay, so it's been floating around like that for the first year. You know what happened was, so this is like a sort of correction, a bear market, if you will. And the question is, what happens after that? Well, what happened after that was the green line, if you see very low, that is the height of the previous chart. Okay, the green line is the height of the previous chart. So what we did was we squashed down the whole shape down very low, because by 2013, the Bitcoin price went up past $200 RMB, went up to a very high of 2,000 RMB, and that was in April of 2013. So that was the first bull market in China, first bull Bitcoin market, and that's a 10x increase. Okay, let's see if 20x increase from 100 RMB. 20x increase, okay? That was just in April. And that's when I got involved. I joined BTC China as CEO, as a third co-founder, and I fundraised for the company. So this is where I started my career with Bitcoin. Even though I heard about it in 2011, I really started my career with BTC China in 2013. And of course, it corrected a lot. So it went from 2,000, fell back down. If you note, at the end of the chart, it's about 700 RMB. Was that terrible? Fell down by 2/3. Would you feel bad? Yes? Yeah? I'm walking you through it because I'll tell you something. I'll bring it back to current history, okay? So what happened after that is this chart, now we squash everything back down. The green line is where the height of the previous chart was. We're going to squash it down now. There's going to be a pattern, okay? So now you see that small speed bump in the middle? That was the peak of April 2013. Towards the right side of the chart, you'll see that was a second rally of 2013. It went up to, oh my gosh, 7,000 RMB. And as you recall, that was around $1,200 US. That's like the price of 1 ounce of gold, okay? So that was a huge run up in November of 2013. And that's when the world talked about Bitcoin. And by December of 2013, China government, PBOC, said Bitcoin is banned. Well, actually, they didn't say that. You guys said it. The press all claimed in big headlines, China bans Bitcoin. What happened was, in December 5th of 2013, the PBOC and 4 other departments issued a statement that digital currencies like Bitcoin is not real money. It's like, really? Bitcoin is not real money? Okay. And then, so I was a head scratcher. Well, of course it's not real money. You know, if it were real money, you know, you guys would be screwed. But they also outlawed businesses in accepting Bitcoin. I'm like, okay, fine. They have the right to do that. So they didn't allow business to take Bitcoin, and they said that Bitcoin trading platforms like BTC China should be properly regulated, and so on and so forth. So when they issued that stern warning, the Bitcoin prices crashed, and that's what the crash was, from 7,000 back down to 3,000. Okay, so Bitcoin prices crashed down to 3,000. Is that terrible? Well, it depends on when you bought it. So if you bought it at, you know, in April at 2,000 at the peak, you're still up 50%. If you bought it in 2012 at 200 RMB, you're up a lot. Even at 100 RMB, you're up a lot. Or if you bought it at the very dipping at 14 RMB, you're up like 100 times. You follow me? Or 200 times, okay? So again, we see a U shape, it goes up, and this time it's a 4x increase. So the next chart, we see the huge pattern here, a repeating pattern, and this is the bear market. The bear market ran from 2014 through 2016. That was a very long bear market for Bitcoin, and that was what we call ourselves the winter of Bitcoin. And essentially, when will this stop? Well, the pattern, the whole point of putting these graphs is to show you a pattern that I've noticed over the many years. And then, of course, in 2017 is what we call the Great Bull Market. And in fact, if you look at the end of 2016, this is precisely what got the China government all worried again. So by Donald Trump's election, I know a lot of people don't like him. I love him because he did great things for Bitcoin price. Well, obviously there's no causation, but that was a joke. I don't like him either. It went, in November, it went from 5,000 RMB, which is about $700, all the way up to $1,000. And the PBOC or the State Council or the Chinese government, they really got worried. For some reason, and this is a weird thing, for some reason, they think they have the right to control the price of Bitcoin. They think that they have the, it's funny, they have the audacity to think that they can decide what is too expensive versus what is not expensive. It's a very Chinese mentality. Would you agree? Yes? Some of you know what I'm talking about, yeah? So the Chinese have this audacity to think that they can think it's too expensive, not too expensive. So by the end of 2016, we know from hindsight, from talking to the officials, that they thought it was too expensive. So they came cracking down. So on January 5th, the first thing they did was, actually, this is showing it. Yeah, I didn't show it. It's in this small chart. But essentially, after this, it crashed again to crashed by 20, 25, 30% on January 5th because they came in. The PBOC sent officials to my company to investigate Bitcoin exchanges, and they're gonna, threaten to close us. So that was like, oh my gosh, we're all really stressed. So that's what happened in early 2017. But what happened was their so-called investigation didn't lead to anything. They were trying to figure out if there was money laundering, if there was illegal activity and stuff like that. So they told us to change a few things about how we did our business, margin lending, trading volumes, fees, and so on. So we did that. We complied, and the price just kept going up and up and up. So this chart, that breakout above the green line is what happened after January. So essentially, from January, it went from 6,000, 7,000 RMB, it crossed 10,000, and it was never to be seen again, 10,000 RMB. And it went up to 20,000 in the summertime. By June, hit 20,000 RMB. That's when the world was going crazy. That's like it passed all-time high, of course. And then it did a mini crash in August. And then it went to 30,000. And finally, this also coincided with the ICO craze, initial coin offering. So I won't talk about that much, but there was a craze of ICOs in the summer, and the Chinese government decided that we're going to shut down all ICOs. So they issued the edict in early September 4th of 2017, and the market crashed a little bit. And then, of course, 10 days later, on September 14th, they made it clear to the whole world that they're going to shut down all Chinese Bitcoin trading platforms. So that's when my company, we got noticed from the PBOC. We had to shut down. There was no choice. There was actually no law. It was a verbal threat. You guys better do this. You have to do it. They weren't referencing any law or anything. They threatened that they could reference some laws, and we're like, okay, we'll believe you. So, so we shut down. And of course, in China, if we don't shut down, all the other people come after us, like the fire, inspectors, all those crazy departments. They all come and take a look, look for rats, look for, combustible materials. And anyways, so we played nice and we just shut down. And then, of course, that's the end of my chart, because this chart is all real live data, real data from our trading platform. So our trading stopped on September 30th at about 28,000 renminbi. So on the announcement of the shutdown, the price went from 22,000 down to 16,000, a fall of about 25%. People were panic selling. When we announced that we're going to close BTC China, the world's longest running Bitcoin exchange. By then, we were the world's longest running Bitcoin exchange. Think of it like the world's longest running bank. We were like the world's longest running, just at 6 years of age. because the other guy who started before us, they went bankrupt. So we had the dubious honor of being the world's longest running Bitcoin exchange for many years. So the price crashed from 22,000 down to 16,000, and people were trying to catch a falling knife and stuff like that. That's that red line, that second red line for that big drop down. That was the day, September 14th, okay? So it recovered in a matter of days. In a matter of days. That really pissed off the government, I think. Now, I haven't really asked anyone there, but I think that really pissed them off. So the next chart, here we go. This is the animation. So we see a pattern of U's and upward arrows and so on and so forth. And now, this time it was a 5x increase since the last high. So the question is, what happens after the closure of BTC China? And you'll be interesting to see. Now I lengthened the chart for another 5 years. Give us plenty of time, plenty of room. And I've pushed it all down to the green line, okay? So the green line is the height of this chart, okay? So now, this is the fun part, okay? You see those specks of rising back in 2003? Those, what were speed bumps then is now like a speck of dust. What was a big mountain is now like a speed bump, you know? So what was the huge mountain of 2017 is now just one small step of a staircase, okay? So what we see here is like a fractal pattern. And I've been working on this slide for a while now, but even in the last 3 months, this slide has changed dramatically. So this is where Bitcoin price is today. After the closure of the Chinese exchange. This is where we're at. It didn't even take us 5 years. It took us barely 5 months to get to this price. Okay, so obviously there might be a correction and it could go to the moon. Okay, so this is just to give you an idea of where, this is all my charts, this is all my own speculation of where things could happen. But this is honestly what I think, how I see the world. Because how do you measure Bitcoin? Is Bitcoin more expensive than gold? Who here thinks Bitcoin is more expensive than gold? Bitcoin is at $15,000. Who thinks Bitcoin, yes? See, it was only a few of you. You got tricked. I asked, it was a trick question, obviously. Right? Gold we know is what price? Is $1,200, $1,300 per ounce. But the key word is per ounce. I didn't ask about gold per kilogram. I didn't ask about gold per ton. Right? If you measure gold on a tonnage basis, Bitcoin is not more expensive. So how do you compare Bitcoin and gold? The only way to properly compare Bitcoin and gold is to take the whole supply and then see the value of that. So gold today, the whole supply is actually not that much. It's 7 meters by 7 meters by 7 meters high. A cube that is 7 meters on each side. That's a whole worldwide supply of gold, about 170,000 tons of gold. That gold today, the whole world, the so-called above ground gold that humanity has mined from the earth, is worth about $8 trillion US dollars. Okay? So is Bitcoin more expensive than gold? So by that measurement, this is my measurement, okay? Bitcoin is not more expensive because Bitcoin today is only at 250 billion, which is 1/30th of gold. Okay, does that make sense? On a per capita basis, that's another way to look at it. Worldwide, not Hong Kong, not the FCC, but the worldwide. 7-8 billion people worldwide. That means on a per capita basis, each person in the world, rich and poor, young and old, man and woman, old and baby, each person is carved out at about 1,000 US dollars worth of gold each. Just a bit, about 30 grams, a little bit less than an ounce. On a per capita basis, each person would only get 0.002 Bitcoins on a per capita basis. And if you take that 0.002, and if that were worth $1,000 and so on, Bitcoin would be at 30 times the price today, which would be at $500,000. Okay, so for Bitcoin to truly be at the price of gold, it would be $500,000 US dollars. Okay, so in China, Bitcoin is not about payments and spending. Rather, Bitcoin is about investing in speculative trading. No surprise there. So how do you invest in Bitcoin? I'm going to give you a few hints and what not to do in making mistakes. Would you like to hear that? Okay, so this is my prized information. Okay, this is worth millions. You laugh, but I don't kid you. Some of you here in this room today, January 3rd, 2018, if you follow this advice, maybe years later, you will invite me to dinner and say, Bobby, thank you. I made millions from listening to you back, however many years ago. And it's true because I've already had that kind of stuff. People already walk up to me like that today. In 2000, they come to me and say, Bobby, can I buy you dinner? You've done really well for my family. I'm like, what did I do? I just gave some advice many years ago. So here are the 4 mistakes don't make. By the way, if you want to follow me on Twitter, I do a lot of commentary and stuff on Twitter. You could get a lot of my past perspective on it. So the 4 mistakes when investing in Bitcoin. So let me ask you before we start. We're almost done. We're going to do the Q&A. How many of you are actually investing in Bitcoin, either already or planning to invest in Bitcoin? Let's see your hands high up. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 12. About 12 people. Okay, thank you. Okay, so these 4 advice applies to you. It may also apply to the 98 other people who did not raise their hands. It's for you to decide. Number 1, don't make the mistake of being indecisive to make the investment. In simple English, it means don't wait. Okay? When I learned about Bitcoin in 2011, I was very, very indecisive. I was like, I don't know. Should I? Should I not? And I waited 2 years, and it cost me millions. Really, millions. Okay? Number 2, not buying enough. Okay. This is kind of silly, but it's true. We all make this mistake. Well, okay, finally, I'm ready to buy. And then I buy like a little bit. Then what's the point? Why did I wait so long to only buy a little bit? So not buying enough, we always say this in hindsight, this is the most terrible mistake we've made, number 2. The third one is interesting. This is, you won't get this in any other investment area. It's about selling after making a small gain. And when I say small gain, I don't mean like 5% gain. I mean like 300% gain. Okay, in hindsight, if you sold after tripling your money, that was a terrible idea because it went up 100 times after that. Okay, so this is one of those key mistakes. If you ever buy Bitcoin, if you ever buy it in the future, don't do this mistake. Don't sell it after just 2 or 3x, okay? Hold it for a long term. Number 4 is selling it during a panic crash. And this is what I'm talking about this year, when it fell from 20,000 to 16,000. And even just in the last 2 weeks, it fell from 20,000 US dollars to about 15,000 today or 12,000. It fell like a third. If you were like selling, 2 weeks ago or 1 week ago at 12,000, 14,000 US dollars, you might regret it. Okay, so just these are 4 of my tidbits. So China. What do China's regulators think of Bitcoin? And I'm going to give you the blunt answer here. There's a lot of bad things about Bitcoin as well. And here's what's on their mind. For them, it's very, very challenging to regulate Bitcoin. It's decentralized, not a real currency. It violates foreign currency controls, money laundering, lack of real identity. It's used for fraud, a lot of pyramid schemes. It's hacking, security risks everywhere, ICO regulation, taxation issues, corruption and graft, a lot of speculative trading. Markets can crash. It's competition with government-issued crypto. So for all those reasons, China has decided to not properly regulate Bitcoin and essentially ask Bitcoin exchanges to close down and punt the issue down the road for a few years. Okay, so other countries like Japan, US are ahead of the curve here. In any case, the decision is to suppress Bitcoin in China. No exchanges, no centralized trading, no pricing information, no ICOs, certainly no Bitcoin, Ethereum, Litecoin, no more, nothing, nada. It reminds me of those 3 monkeys, right? They try to ignore the problem by covering their eyes, their ears, not talking about it. But the issue is still there. Bitcoin is still there. So as you can see, since China has so-called banned Bitcoin again for the second time, Bitcoin value has gone up, 5x in China. And the trading is still happening. It's just not happening with us. Okay? All right. Bitcoin will still survive. Okay, let's do the Q&A.
Okay.
Oh, one more thing. This is a closing comment. So Bitcoin's value does not come from the endorsement, acceptance, or regulation by government. That's a key thing, okay? Rather, Bitcoin's value comes from the inherent failures, limitations, and inconveniences of the existing fiat money system, okay? Thank you. So Q&A.
Yes, thank you. That was really entertaining and insightful. If you have any questions, please raise your hand. If, the mic will come to you, and state your name and which organization that you're from. I see a gentleman over there.
Hello, Jeff Galbraith, member. I have a very simple question. You said the total number of, I think everybody in this room knows that the total number is 21 million. What is the current outstanding?
16.5 million. 16.5 million.
Say, how many were outstanding 2 or 3 years ago?
I think the world has saw an increase of about 1 million to 2 million in the last 3-4 years. Yeah, last 2-3 years. Yeah.
Another question? Oh, Florence.
Yeah, Florence Changier, report for a French newspaper, Le Monde. Number one, how has the ban that you described affected your company? I mean, what's left for you to do in this Chinese context? And then the second question I had is if you could comment on the reaction of other countries and regulators in the region, because I heard that quite a few countries, including Korea and Vietnam, were equally opposed to Bitcoins. Thank you.
Yeah. So for our company, BTCC, we ran the BTC China exchange. We have since had to shut that down. So we're pivoting a little bit. We're getting out of the exchange business in China, and instead we're focusing on 2 remaining businesses, which is the Mobi, which is a cryptocurrency wallet. It's a mobile wallet for your phone. You could download it, search for it on an app store. Mobi space Bitcoin, search for that. And then the second thing we do is a mining pool business, which is more of a B2B business. So we do use those 2 things. Now regarding
Sorry, just to understand, the people who were with you investing through your exchange, what happened? And since you said information is key, I guess they have not lost their Bitcoin?
Yeah, they still have the Bitcoin. Many of them have already withdrawn their assets from our platform. So we've notified everyone that we're going to close down the website and the company, the BTC China side, and we've requested and required everyone to come and take their money out, take their CNY money out and take their Bitcoins out. So we've done that process already. We're in the final phases of shutting that down. And in terms of regulation in the region, in the Asia region, Japan is pretty forthcoming. They've issued cryptocurrency regulation last year, so they issue licenses to Bitcoin exchanges and companies. So I'm excited to see that happen. South Korea is doing something similar. China has taken the other approach to not allow exchanges. And I think other countries, Vietnam, Malaysia, they're looking into things like that as well. I think Hong Kong is very much going to follow China, unfortunately. So Hong Kong, in theory, should be the biggest capital for Bitcoin. But I think for some reason, Hong Kong people never got onto it. So, yeah.
Any more questions? Gentleman at the front, and then gentleman at the back.
Jeremy Bolland, member. You say that to get entitlement to it, you get an encrypted account. Now, the Nazis thought that their Enigma code was unbreakable. How confident are you that this code is unbreakable?
Oh, good question about the strength of the cryptography behind Bitcoin. So Bitcoin private keys are actually very large in size. They are 160 bits of encryption. Okay, so meaning 2 to 160 bits. Your bank card with the 6-digit PIN is only about 1 million combinations. So the joke is, I have my bank card, ICBC, whatever, or HSBC, right? 6 digits, right? 1 million combinations. But turns out there's about 1,000 people in China that know my password, that know my PIN. They just don't know who they are. I don't know them, and so on and so forth, because there's only so many to go around. With Bitcoin, it's 2 to the 160 power. So literally, it's trillions and gazillions and quadrillions and so on and so forth. It's impossible to brute force and break the key for that. By the time, let's say, quantum computers come, if they were able to break it, Bitcoin will upgrade to that higher standard. And the reason is that it's similar with all the other applications we use, whether it's online banking, e-commerce, or secure communication. We all have the same problem, all the apps, not just Bitcoin. Yeah.
Gentleman at the back, and any more questions?
Hello, I'm Robin Wong. I'm actually.
Where are you?
I'm here.
Okay.
Yeah.
Hi.
Okay. As an investor, I mean, I just if I really have a lot of money, I mean, let's say I have 100,000. How do I invest? I mean, how easy is it to me to put the money into the exchange, and how liquid it is, and how easy it is if I want to get out? I mean.
Yeah. The truthful answer is very hard. It's very hard. today, less than 10 million people worldwide own digital currencies and Bitcoin. Less than 10 million. That sounds like a lot of number. It's a very small fraction. That's why the vast majority of you don't own Bitcoin. It's because it's hard for you. You've been thinking about it. You just don't know how to do it. This has been the case for the last few years. It's going to get better in the next 5-10 years. It's going to take some time for the world to sort of catch up. So today, what you have to do is you have to deposit. You have to open an account with an exchange, either in Hong Kong or Europe or the United States. You have to submit identification information, KYC information, just like you open a bank account. And they have to wire transfer money to the exchange, and they have to buy Bitcoin as if you're buying a stock. Set market orders, limit orders, and then all that stuff. So it's very complicated. But you get rewarded for that complication because you're ahead of the curve. So for those of you who have the passion and want to try this, go try it. You're going to get Bitcoin at $15,000 when, in fact, your friends and family who wait 5 years will do it easier when the ETFs come out, when all the other products come out in 5-10 years, but they will pay a much higher price for it. Does that make sense? That's my comment.
And gentleman at the back. Yeah.
I have two questions. One is, since the price is so volatile, what do you think of creating an options market to trade the volatility? That's the first one. Second question is, what do you think of the prospect of commercial applications on blockchain?
Yeah. So let me ask. Okay, why is the price volatile? Let me address that first. The reason the price is volatile is because we're in the discovery phase of a brand new asset class that started literally at $0. So if this asset class is meant to equal gold, it should be at 8 trillion. If this asset class is to surpass gold, because gold is very cumbersome and outdated in the digital world internet, if this asset class is surpass gold by 5x, 10x, it'd be at 50 trillion or 100 trillion. From 0 to 100 trillion, you can never have an asset class that goes up in a straight line because humans want to take advantage of the moves. So if it's going up straight, people buy it up. And then when it's overbought, it'll sell it back down. So that's why it's been going up in a very zigzag pattern over the last few years. So it might take 50 years for the asset class to really mature at whatever multi-trillion dollar value it will be at. Okay, that's number one. For the options market, yes, there's need for it. Several companies in different jurisdictions are already starting an options market for Bitcoin, just like the futures market started in the United States. The Chicago Mercantile Exchange and the CME and the CBOT started that last month. There'll be more futures market for Bitcoin in other parts of the world, whether it's Hong Kong or Europe, and same thing for options market. And then for commercial use, Bitcoin is a great asset class for investment. Today, Bitcoin is not suitable as a small currency, micropayments for buying coffee, but that's fine. There are other digital currencies that will take that place for it. Yeah.
Yep, gentleman over there, and then.
Thank you. I'm a Japanese reporter with Nikkei. Can you describe a little bit how typical customers of yours inside China withdrew their Bitcoin? In the form of Bitcoin itself or in the form of RMB? Or second, what did they do next?
Yeah.
Where did they go?
Yeah, so customers who came to trade on BTCC China, they could buy the Bitcoin, or they could bring the Bitcoins they mined and sell it. So they could either buy, sell, or withdraw in renminbi or withdraw as Bitcoin. To be honest, I don't know what they do with it. There's no way for me to know. It's like asking a bank, what do the customers do with the money after they withdraw from the ATM? The banks don't know. They can install security cameras around the ATMs. They still don't know what's going to happen with the money because it's untraceable. Does that make sense? So when my customers withdraw the Bitcoins, unless they tell me, honestly, I don't know what they do with it. They could send it to other exchanges. They could buy illicit goods. They could keep it and give it to their kids. I have no idea what they do with it. But certainly, they can move around all over the world because anything that's Bitcoin is already global. It's not like they have to move it outside of China. The moment it becomes Bitcoin, it's global. So there's no crossing of borders. Does that make sense? So when I came from Shanghai, flew here from Shanghai last night across the borders, my Bitcoins didn't cross the borders. Right? And the reason is that Bitcoins exist in the cloud. It's just information. The information didn't cross the border. Because what if I had 2 copies of the information? Right? It's just like your email. When you travel with your phone, your emails and SMSs, they don't get exported out of Hong Kong, get imported into Malaysia or Japan in this case, right? Okay.
Gentleman at the front, yep.
Yeah, thank you very much. This has been very informative. My name is John Antweather. I'm retired and a member of the club. My question really is why Bitcoin versus Ethereum versus, now they say level 3 cryptos are coming out. Why Bitcoin?
I am a huge supporter of Bitcoin because I believe in fundamentals. It's just like people who invest in blue chip stocks. You can always find that other stock that's going to outperform the blue chips, but I believe in fundamentals, and I think Bitcoin is the main key sort of cryptocurrency. And the fact of the matter is there are many people out there who also believe the way I do. So as long as the world have people who are conservative like my perspective, Bitcoin will always maintain its so-called edge over all the other cryptocurrencies. Yeah.
Any more questions? Oh, gentleman over there.
Hello, my name is Angus Forsyth. I'm a member. It seems to me that the popular fallacy is really derived out of the fact that Bitcoin is described as a currency. I understand a currency to be a medium of exchange. And the medium of exchange started off with the Greeks who made little coins out of gold and silver instead of exchanging with barter. You didn't have fish for fishing nets, but you just paid in coins. And that continued until, let's say, 20 years ago. Suddenly Bitcoin came along, has been described as a currency. But actually it's not a currency, because as you rightly said just now, if I want to buy a packet of cigarettes, I can't do it with Bitcoin or even a fraction of a Bitcoin. Nobody will want to sell me the cigarettes. They need currency. So it's the fallacy of calling it a currency which has really misled everybody. And actually, it's a capital asset investment, pure and simple. Is that right?
You could view it that way. I would not disagree with you. I think over the years myself, over the last 7 years, I've wavered in terms of how I see it. What I do know, my thoughts on this have evolved, and my mature thoughts today, which may be immature in hindsight 10 years from now, my perspective is this. Traditionally, assets and money have been different because money is what's circulating, what's easy to move around and pay for things. Whereas assets like cars and stocks and bonds and real estate, they're not suitable to buy coffee because you can't carve off a small brick of your home or carve off like a headlight of your car to exchange that for a cup of coffee. Even gold, it's hard. People don't buy a gold bar and then shave off the edge of it and pay for coffee or lunch. So that's why traditionally assets have been far removed, and currency and money was invented as an easier way of circulating the value of the hard asset. But in the digital world today, with Bitcoin, the fact that it's digital, the fact that it can be subdividable into really, really small parts, it actually makes it possible to pay for coffee, pay for lunch with fractional amounts of Bitcoin. That's where we're at. So in the so-called courageous world of digitalness, I truly believe digital assets one day will be easily used for both as a long-term investment and also for small payments, whether it's buying a coffee or even buying a car.
We have time for one last question. Gentleman at the back.
Hi. I was wondering if you could comment on the electricity usage that's going to be used for mining these coins, because there's been reports about how it's kind of be unsustainable long-term wise, how much power is needed to mine them. And maybe you can comment also on any other challenges potentially that you could see for Bitcoin.
Yeah, Bitcoin mining today is a creation process, the calculation of the Bitcoins, and that uses electricity. So to me, it's fine. It's a good thing that people are securing the network using computing power, and computing power by definition uses electricity. So for me, it's not a bad thing. People ask that question as if saying Bitcoin mining is wasting electricity. That's like me saying, oh, Apple's wasting a lot of electricity having their server farms, or Google is wasting a lot of electricity having their server farms, or that, Saudi Arabia is wasting a lot of energy trying to mine, drill the oil or mine the gold from the mountains. So the point is a matter of perspective. If you are using resources, whether it be electricity resources or human resources, to move things, to make things happen, to make a product, a commodity, by definition, it's valuable. It's worth it. But from the eye of the beholder of someone else who doesn't do it, they might think it's wasteful. So it's a matter of perspective. I don't think it's good or bad. So that's how it is. I think the world will be like this for a long, long time.
Thanks, everyone. That closes our talk, everyone. Bobby Lee. That was really entertaining and informative. Also, a token of our appreciation.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.